In a strange room, a boy wakes to the sound of his phone alarm. As his eyes flutter open, he's startled. The entire room is covered in red, cryptic scriptures. He wonders who could have written all that while he slept. But then, bizarrely, the letters begin to vanish. He shakes his head, thinking he must be hallucinating from just waking up. It was disturbingly realistic, though. Glancing around, he suddenly realizes this isn't his room. Confusion begins to mount. The instant noodles he ate last night and the tissues he tossed on the floor are gone. He starts to panic. As he tries to gather his thoughts, strange memories flood his mind. They're not his, but they belong to someone just like him. Both orphans, but they lived vastly different lives. While our protagonist studied hard and made it to a prestigious university, the person whose body he now inhabits dropped out of school and ended in a dead-end job. He stares at his trembling hands, wondering if he's been transported to another world. And what were those bloody words on the ceiling? The memories of this body's former owner have no mention of them. As he tries to make sense of the situation, a voice calls out, referring to him as husband, saying it's time for breakfast. He turns to see a woman with a curvaceous figure. As he admires her, the word husband puzzles him. In his life, he wasn't married. She sits on the bed, urging him to get up because it's getting late. Despite the oddness, he can't help but notice her beauty, and a thought creeps into his mind. Maybe this transmigration wasn't so bad after all. He swallows hard, realizing that without this strange twist of fate, he would never have had such a beautiful, seemingly kind wife. She keeps calling him for breakfast, and he's not sure what to call her. Baby, wife, darling? He tries searching the memories for her name, but finds nothing. No shared experiences, no affection, nothing at all. He turns back to her with unease. She's just standing there, motionless. Something is off. A fly lands on her eye, but she doesn't react. Hesitant, he asks, "Who are you?" She pauses, then says, "So, you can see." Her mouth suddenly distorts into something monstrous, and cold sweat runs down his neck. He tries to stay calm, telling her he's just confused, but it's too late. She transforms into a towering creature, repeating, "You can see." Terrified, he screams, but it's futile. She devours him. Suddenly, he wakes up again in bed, drenched in sweat. Shaken, he tries to convince himself it was just a nightmare. But when he looks up, the words in blood are still there, just as before. They vanish, just as they did the first time. Staring at his hand, he realizes he has to pretend to be blind. However, the memories tell him the former owner of this body wasn't blind. He lived a normal, mundane life. That means he must hide the fact that he can see her. A hand appears through the door, calling him to breakfast again. The woman approaches seductively, and he steels himself, knowing he can't react. She places her hands on him, and cold sweat trickles down his spine. This time, he pretends to be distracted, pulling out his phone and watching TikTok videos. She leans in, asking why he's looking at other women in front of her. He fumbles, insisting he loves the girl on the live stream, trying to ignore her. But she presses him, asking if he doesn't like her anymore. Feeling uneasy, he keeps his eyes glued to the phone, knowing he can't seem strange. But then she appears on his phone screen, live streaming herself. Panicking, he throws the phone across the bed. Trembling, he knows he's been found out. She approaches, transforming into her monstrous form again. This time, he throws a punch in desperation, but she dodges and sinks her teeth into his arm. Agonizing pain fills him as she devours him, piece by piece, until he dies again. He wakes up once more, cold and drenched in sweat, but this time he's furious at that woman. He's stuck in a loop, dying again and again. On the 6th time, her approach still frightens him to death. By the 8th time, he tries to escape, but there's no way out. Every time she knows he can see, he dies. Eventually, he concludes he must play along and pretend to like her. When she brings breakfast, he flatters her, saying she's amazing, hoping to buy himself some time. But she eats all the food, leaving him hungry. He dies 13 more times, each death bringing him new fragments of memory. He learns more about the world, a place full of bizarre horrors and tales. By the 18th death, he's asking deeper questions. Who wrote the bloody words? Why do they vanish? He wakes up, more determined than ever. Though he doesn't know who's responsible, he's certain of one thing. His so-called wife is one of them, a monster. He whispers to himself that she must die, for he deserves to live. She enters the room once more, calling him husband and saying it's time for breakfast. He gets up, knowing she never initiates physical contact. As she stands in the doorway, she asks if he wants to start the day by. He stood frozen, inches from her, but walked right through as if she were nothing but air. Just as he suspected, she could only interact with him if she knew for sure he could see her. Meanwhile, she pouted beside him, insisting she'd already made breakfast and was waiting for him. The poor guy sighed, thinking, the prettier they are, the bigger the lie. She claimed breakfast was ready, but there wasn't a single plate in sight. Resigned, he made himself a quick snack, knowing that if he could just leave the room, he might uncover more about this so-called wife. As he took a bite of the snack, the floor shifted beneath him. She had transformed again, her voice whispering from the tiles, "Are you seeing anything?" He hurried to the door, intent on escaping. But the doorknob twisted into her face, her pleading eyes staring at him. "Where are you going? Why won't you stay home with me?" Ignoring her, he opened the door and stepped out. Inwardly, he fumed. No one kills me 18 times and gets away with it. Revenge was now at the forefront of his mind. He'd find a way to get rid of her and return. But as he opened the apartment door, his heart sank. The sky was an eerie shade of red, filled with grotesque, deformed creatures. The streets, once familiar, were now crowded with shadowy figures, human silhouettes that barely resembled people. Fear gripped him, but a laugh bubbled up inside, escaping his lips like a madman's cackle. This world is really something," he muttered, a strange grin forming on his face. Suddenly his stomach churned, and he vomited onto the pavement. A small voice behind him startled him. "Uncle, are you okay?" He turned to see a little girl, her innocent eyes watching him curiously. Trying to compose himself, he smiled and said, "I'm fine. You can call me Big Brother." He patted her head gently, thinking how adorable she was and how he'd love to have a daughter one day. But then, in a flash, her form twisted and distorted into a monstrous being. "You can see," she growled, her voice deep and otherworldly. His heart nearly stopped. The girl had transformed into a towering demon with a blade-like arm. For a moment, he was speechless. Then, with the same unhinged laugh as before, he said, "Well, this just keeps getting better." He marveled at the sight, his amusement growing. "I like this. I really do. This way, when I kill you, I won't feel an ounce of guilt." He was ready to fight, but she struck first, tearing him to pieces. As his consciousness faded, he muttered something about how interesting this world was. Again, he woke up in his bed, drenched in cold sweat. His balloon-like wife was at his side, cooing, "Husband, are you all right? The sun's already rising." He groaned internally, thinking, eating breakfast 20 times in one day is exhausting. Later that day, he found himself sitting on a park bench, his mind racing. Once again, the little girl approached him, asking if he could take her home to find her mother. But this time, he wasn't fooled. He knew the madness of this world, the various types of creatures that inhabited it. Some were bizarre and aggressive, unable to affect the world around them, like phantoms. Others, like his wife, were eerily human in appearance. They did nothing but try to get close, and the moment they got a reaction, they'd strike. He mused about these creatures, wondering why they mimicked human life. Was it that they wanted to integrate somehow? As he pondered, his phone buzzed. A notification popped up, a payment of 3 cents. "Great, that'll help me survive," he muttered sarcastically. He needed money to figure out how to navigate this nightmare of a world. Just then, a message from his work group appeared. A guy named Wudai was calling for him. His name, Yizu Fangu, appeared in the chat. He worked for a company selling apartments, and he remembered that he still hadn't received his commission from his last sale. Sending a quick message to resolve that, he hopped on his bike and sped off. He didn't know what awaited him next, but one thing was clear. In this twisted world, nothing was ever as it seemed. When he arrived, something felt off. Where the company's building should have been, there stood a hospital instead. It looked more like an abandoned structure than a place of business. He stood at the door, cold sweat running down his back, wondering if this really was where he was supposed to sell apartments. His phone rang, snapping him out of his confusion. He answered, saying he was on his way up, and asked if everyone was in the office. The people on the other end casually confirmed, mentioning that the owner's son had tried calling him several times but couldn't reach him. The protagonist brushed it off, saying he'd be there soon. As he ventured inside, he realized this place was clearly affected by some twisted version of reality. Strangely, the people on the call didn't seem disturbed. It made him both cautious and curious. Walking down the corridor, he suddenly bumped into something soft. Confused, he reached out, trying to figure out what it was. His hand touched something warm, two magical spheres of clairvoyance that somehow promised a pleasant future. His face turned red, realizing what he'd grabbed. Before he could react further, a sharp slap landed on his cheek, snapping him back to the moment. A girl appeared, screaming that she'd report him, and ran off to find the guard. Dazed, he glanced up and saw the words B Academy above the door. But the moment he blinked, the place reverted to the abandoned hospital. He reached for the wall again, but his hand passed through it. That's when it clicked. He couldn't physically interact with this reality. It was just like those creatures that needed specific conditions to be perceived. He passed through the wall, feeling dizzy as he entered another desolate corridor. After checking several rooms, all of which were empty, he stopped at a door emitting a strong metallic smell of blood. Hesitant, he once again phased through it. Inside, he found a girl on the floor, sobbing softly. She slowly lifted her head, calling him Big Brother, but he had learned not to engage. Ignoring her, he phased through the next wall. On the other side, he was greeted by another grotesque creature, but he didn't flinch. The monster seemed puzzled as it watched him walk away without a single reaction. He realized that the hospital was filled with these bizarre beings, each confined to their rooms, yet some doors were wide open, as if they could escape at any moment. Thanks to his wife killing him 18 times, he had grown used to ignoring these horrors, becoming almost indifferent to their presence. He pressed on until he found a stack of papers scattered on the floor. They detailed something about experiment number 128 and how it had undergone some sort of transformation. Curious, he crouched to pick them up, but as soon as he touched them, he found he couldn't turn the pages. He was still too disconnected from this world to fully interact with it. Just then, something brushed past him. He looked up and saw it was the long hair of a creature on the ceiling. It slithered down beside his face, asking seductively if he was there to explore the mysteries of life with her. He ignored her too, deciding that his next stop should be the director's office. From the body's memories, he knew this building was the same one where his sales company should have been, and the director's office was located where the old staff room used to be. As he made his way up the stairs, someone suddenly called out, "Brother Sue, what are you doing here?" Startled, he turned to see a chubby man storming towards him, yelling furiously, "How dare you show up to work when you're all ready?" The rest of the man's words were drowned out as reality itself seemed to twist and bend once again. Fangu walks down the corridor, pushing past the two people in his way, convinced there's nothing of interest on this floor. The guy with glasses looks bewildered, and the boss, still fuming, curses at him, demanding to know why he's heading to the second floor. He orders the man with glasses to stop him, but Fangu is already halfway there, undeterred. Ignoring their protests, he makes his way to the director's office. Someone shouts for him to stop, but it's too late. His hand is already on the doorknob. Behind him, his so-called friends are panicking, knowing something bad is about to happen. Just as he opens the door, he catches sight of a figure inside. He can already tell what's coming. "Look at that waistline," he mutters under his breath. The scene before him unfolds as his colleague is squashed into the ground. People in the office ask who Fangu is and what he's doing there, but he barely acknowledges them. One woman tries to grab his arm, asking him to let go, but he shoves her aside, calling her too noisy. She falls to the ground, and another guy rushes to help her, but does nothing to stop him, as Fangu begins rifling through the papers on the desk. Just as he expected, there's something big hidden in this mental hospital. He finds a letter, which mentions that if he wants to receive the gift of fate and uncover the secrets of the world, he needs to go to room 520. Fangu pauses, wondering if the letter was left for him. How did they know he was coming? It's in Building C, room 520. Suddenly, the lamp overhead bursts, shattering the tension. His friend with glasses, still trailing behind him, seems rattled, while the others who stayed back whisper that they're terrified. Fangu pulls out his phone, uneasy, and realizes that something is off. His friend asks why he's been acting so strange today, barely talking to anyone. Using the phone to light his way, Fangu realizes he's no longer in the mental hospital, but back in his old company building. His colleague tries to lighten the mood by asking the chubby guy for his phone, but there's no signal. Fangu reassures him, though, saying with his status, he can access more than they think. But deep down, he knows something's wrong. Everything points to them being trapped in a strange, alternate world. The once normal reality has been tainted by anomalies. The employees are still preoccupied with their work, anxious about not finishing their tasks on time. One of the guards offers to check the power outage and leaves, but minutes pass and he doesn't return. One of the girls kneels to retrieve her phone, using the flashlight, but it's too dim. Fangu turns on his own phone's light, noticing that it's weak too. He asks the guy with glasses why his light is just as low. Tension mounts as the blonde man, who was earlier speculating about being in an alternate dimension, snaps. He loses his temper, telling everyone to shut up, warning that the only way they'll survive is by staying calm. His sudden outburst leaves the group in stunned silence. In a hushed voice, the blonde man explains that they've entered a world full of ghosts, essentially an alternate dimension mirroring their own. The group falls quiet again, someone asking about the guard who went to check the lights. It's been over 3 minutes and still no sign of him. Tang, the blonde guy, warns them again. In this world, they must follow the ghost rules or face death. The chubby guy, now trembling, asks what they should do next. Tang grimly replies that they must find a way out or everyone in the building will perish. Cold sweat forms on Fangu's brow as he suddenly hears a familiar sound. His heart drops. He recognizes it. A ghost is approaching. He warns the others, but they think he's joking. "There's no ghost here," they say. But before they can finish, one of the girls screams as something grabs her by the hair. Fangu watches, helpless, as chaos erupts around him. The others scream in terror. Fangu suddenly says that Sholi is already gone. The girl with glasses, clearly frightened, insists that Sholi must have walked away. She was just beside her moments ago. She starts calling out for her friend, desperate for any response. But no one in the room can see anything clearly due to the overwhelming darkness. Wang asks Fangu if he saw the ghost's appearance, but Fangu shakes his head, saying the girl vanished too quickly. At this point, the group starts to grow suspicious of Fangu, questioning why he seems so calm while everyone else is losing their minds. "You don't look scared at all," one of them accuses. "Could you be a spiritual master?" Fangu, confused, asks what that even means. The man finds it odd that Fangu doesn't know what a spiritual master is, yet he's so composed in the midst of the chaos. It makes them question his true identity. The man explains that a spiritual master is someone capable of controlling their spiritual energy, someone who is crucial in situations like these. Fangu, intrigued, asks if this is something one learns in the realm of the strange. If so, he wants to know how. Tang, still observing how unnervingly calm Fangu is, starts to believe he might be their key to escaping this nightmare. He explains that to leave this ghostly world, one must gather the power of the spirits. There are 2 conditions. First, you must experience fear so intense it simulates an emotional trauma, bringing you to the brink of life and death. Second, you must make contact with a ghost, allowing its power to invade your soul. However, Tang warns that ghostly power is like a bloody garment. It may cloak you, but it also stains your soul. Hearing this, Fangu becomes thoughtful. After enduring multiple deaths, he's learned to avoid the ghosts by simply not interacting with them. His wife, the street creatures, all of them are illusions that can't hurt him if he keeps his distance. But he knows that once a ghost crosses into reality, it can kill whether or not it's seen. Fangu begins to wonder if allowing ghostly contact could enable him to defeat these spirits. Picturing his wife, he decides he's crazy enough to become a spiritual master and end her. Suddenly, another person vanishes, sending Tang into a panic. He starts yelling, telling everyone to shut up before they attract more ghosts. Fifi timidly approaches Fangu, asking what they should do, She's terrified of disappearing. Fangu begins to piece together a pattern. The guard vanished after 3 minutes, the first girl disappeared 2 minutes later, and now the next person vanished exactly 2 minutes after that. He calculates that men vanish in 3-minute intervals and women in 2-minute intervals. According to his logic, they only have about 3 minutes left before someone else disappears. Fangu turns to leave the room, and the others shout after him, accusing him of trying to get himself killed. He tells them they'd better start searching for a bat. Solution 2, or soon enough, everyone in the room will be dead. Tang snaps, pointing at Fangu and ordering him to stay put. No one leaves this room, he says with authority. But Fangu ignores him, remarking that, considering there are 8 of them, in 20 minutes there will be no one left. He gives them a final warning as he walks down the corridor. Anyone who tries to stop him will die before the ghosts get to them. As he walks, his friend with glasses questions why they still can't find the stairs. Fangu notices the lights flickering and suddenly realizes they've returned to the hospital. His friend, panicking, asks if they're hallucinating because they could have sworn they were still in the company building. Fangu, now certain, concludes that the company and the hospital are somehow overlapping, trapping them in this bizarre, twisted world. Reality begins to warp as the hospital seems to have swallowed the company entirely. At that moment, they spot a large red pool, blood staining the entire corridor. The uniforms on the floor are unmistakably from the company. Fangu pieces it together, explaining that the ghosts take 2 minutes with women and 3 with men, because that's how long it takes for them to consume their victims. His companion with glasses, horrified, mutters that it seems like the ghosts are still eating Geeling. Fangu finds the scene strange. The last time he passed through here, there wasn't nearly this much blood, and everyone was trapped. Now the cuts on the uniforms confirm his suspicions. A sharp blade is being used, and he's seen only one like it. Suddenly, something shifts above them. Fangu remembers the ghost doctor, the only entity who could move freely. As sounds echo from the ceiling, they realize it's coming from the same direction. When they turn around, the rest of the group from the room comes running towards them, asking what their next move should be. There's an awkward tension, and the chubby guy nervously asks if they discovered anything by coming down first. Before anyone can answer, screams erupt from the group. The girl points out the blood and the torn clothes scattered on the floor, recognizing them as those of their allies. Tang asks, his voice trembling, if everyone has been eaten. In fear, Fei pleads for them to flee immediately, and Tang agrees, urging the group to escape as quickly as possible. They turn to Fangu for leadership, but he remains silent. After a brief pause, he calmly declares that the time has come. Fei, confused, asks what he means by that, but her question is drowned out by a new, horrifying sound, something descending from above. Slowly, they all turn to see the ghost doctor approaching from the ceiling. As Fei's fear spikes, the creature looms closer, its presence unbearable. The group panics and tries to flee, screaming at the monster to stay away. But Tang finds himself frozen in place, stopped by Fei, who had fallen and was begging him to save her. Seeing the ghost doctor get closer, Tang, in a panic, slaps Fei's hand away, yelling for her to let go. With everyone fleeing, Fangu is momentarily lost in thought, recalling his first encounter with the doctor. On the ground, Fei continues to plead, her tear-filled eyes locking onto the approaching figure. But it's too late. The doctor grabs her by the hair. As Fei screams, blood sprays everywhere, the lights flicker, and the grisly sound of tearing flesh fills the room. The friend with glasses is in complete shock, watching helplessly as Fei is ripped apart. The ghost doctor shows no signs of stopping, stabbing her repeatedly with terrifying precision. Fangu, observing closely, notes how advanced the doctor's scalpel techniques are, suggesting she must have been practicing for a long time. The friend beside him trembles, unable to comprehend what they're witnessing, but the doctor appears completely focused, performing 2 surgeries simultaneously with inhuman skill. As the ghost doctor finishes her gruesome task, she opens her mouth, preparing to consume Fei's remains. Fangu realizes that the instinct to devour humans stems from her transformation into a ghost. He steps forward, approaching her without fear. His friend, horrified, begs him to stop and run away, but Fangu continues forward, unfazed. With a sudden movement, he punches the ghost doctor in the face, but recoils in surprise. Her skin feels as tough as steel. He recalls that all the creatures he's encountered so far have been far stronger than any human. The only solution is to become a spiritual master to fight on their level. His friend, still shaking, calls out, insisting they escape while they still can. But Fangu calmly responds, explaining that the doctor only kills one person at a time, which makes this the safest moment, while she's eating. The friend nervously points out that she'll finish eating soon, but Fangu, inspecting the remains, casually mentions that Faye had a bit of extra flesh, which would buy them a little more time. Upon hearing this, the friend can't hold it in any longer and vomits, overcome by the horror of the situation. Fangu recalls that in order to absorb cursed energy from the ghosts, he must be near them, as the concentration of power in this dimension is strongest around these creatures. Physical touch is the best method. Spotting the ghost's inverted thighs, he decides to pat them, hoping for an infection. His friend is horrified and urges him to snap out of it, reminding him that now isn't the time for this kind of behavior. Fangu shrugs, saying that if his friend is too scared, he's free to run away. Hesitant but determined, the friend agrees, suggesting they go all out. He moves closer to touch the ghost's cold legs. As they pat the creature, the friend notes that nothing seems to be happening. Fangu, unfazed, insists they keep going. The friend, now strangely calm, admits that he never imagined his first contact would be with a ghost, but those legs sure are long. Fangu starts to suspect his friend might have hidden potential, especially since moments ago he was trembling in fear, and now he seems oddly composed. Fangu announces that a minute has passed, telling his friend that they'll bother the ghost for another 30 seconds before fleeing. When the timer on Fangu's phone hits 1:30, he stands up and declares it's time to run. His friend hesitates, doubting if they can really escape, and asks where Fangu plans to go. Confident, Fangu says he knows exactly where. Having mapped out the hospital while walking around earlier, they can use the layout to their advantage and gain distance from the ghost. But just as they start moving, the ghost doctor appears in front of them. Fangu freezes, confused. How had she finished eating so quickly? He thought Faye's body had enough mass to slow her down. Then, to his shock, he notices 2 silicone implants lying on the floor. Everything had been fake. The ghost is suddenly behind him. With a swift motion, she slices his neck. Fangu's vision goes black as his head tumbles through the air. But when he opens his eyes again, he's back to the moment when his friend had first remarked on how cold the ghost was. Fangu quickly deduces that the time loops are triggered by specific events or function like checkpoints in a game. The last time he died because of the silicone, so this time he can't make the same mistake. Without wasting a moment, he grabs his friend and tells him they need to get out immediately. The friend, still fascinated by the ghost's legs, protests, wanting to linger a little longer. But Fangu warns him that everything is fake. If they don't run now, they'll both die. The friend, now fully understanding, is shocked, realizing why the legs were so unnaturally big. They sprint down the stairs, narrowly avoiding the ghost, only to encounter the rest of the group, also fleeing in panic. The crowd rushes down the stairs faster than Fangu and his friend, but Fangu grabs the handrail and vaults himself in front of everyone. The chubby guy in the group yells out, thinking Fangu was the ghost, and scolds him for scaring them. The guy with glasses asks why everyone is moving so slowly. Another person retorts that they aren't slow, they've already descended 20 floors. But Xiahao protests, claiming that he and Fangu had only descended 3. The others accuse him of lying, but Fangu realizes what's happening. The ghost is manipulating their perceptions, creating false paths. These illusions trap them in a loop. Fangu thinks for a moment, then suggests everyone throw down spare items to mark their path. The group panics, but starts emptying their bags and pockets, tossing items on the ground. They resume their descent, running as fast as they can. After a few moments, they spot the items again, realizing they've circled back to where they started. The group is shaken, their fear intensifying, as they understand the gravity of the situation. Money and bottles they have thrown, but Fangu is interested in the small shirts. Suddenly Tang shouts and says that only a spiritualist can see the exit, He tells everyone to activate their power and try to see something. He clasps his hands, saying he doesn't know if that previous experience was enough to unleash a powers, but he hopes it is to escape from there. The people are confused, not knowing how they're going to do that. They start trying like the guy did. While Fangu observes the stairs, he remembers that the exits from this corridors were on the right side. Soi must be something similar. Seeing this, Tang asks what he's going to do again. He says he doesn't care about praying and is more interested in finding clues to escape from there. Hao was impressed that Fangu was still very calm, while Hang thought didn't hesitate even for a second when the monster appeared. The strange thing is that now they fled down the stairs and found the two again, not to mention that both spent at least a minute with a monster in the corridors. What happened for some reason, the psycho concludes that they should be taking advantage of the ghost attempt. A a lot of sense, but obviously he thinks that's not possible. Thank God Fangi was touching a wall, and Hao asked what he was doing. He was counting between 10, 12, 15 and said to stop. He said he found it. The friend was impressed that there was actually a door, and Tang appeared asking if they really found it, and came running. The problem was how to open it. They imagined where the lock should be and moved his hand in the void that opened the door from which energy came out. Fang was about to be the first to enter, but bumped into him and ran out saying they were. Definitely saved everyone passed by him desperately trying to escape. How asked why he was letting everyone go ahead and how he was so calm. Fangu knew very well that facing that creature, there was no reason to try to be fast when a chubby big noosed guy appeared telling the two Torin or they'd be used as shields to die. Fang Shu's plan was obvious, easily to see who get caught that way, the ghost would stop and he could increase his spiritual power. The people continued in front, fleeing desperately until suddenly they had to choose between two directions. This created a divergence in the team since everyone wanted other people to go ahead to test the path, and Tang once again asked Fangu what they should do. If he found an iron door, he must know the way out of the. Fangu wasn't very keen on helping, since everyone kept pushing and expecting him to die. The group kept shouting, telling him to speak up quickly, because the coast was approaching. Fang just said he didn't care about that, thinking that for him everyone there was just a tool at that moment. The ghost doctor was invincible, and what he had to do was buy time as she goes down the right path. He thinks that to get out of the he will have to sacrifice lives. As soon as the group sees him take that path, they start running, and a hand can be heard coming from behind. The chubby guy is the last one, and Frank knows very well that she has arrived soon on the ceiling. She's preparing to attack him. As she sees everyone fleeing, she approaches the last one. As the hair draws closer, the chubby guy panics, saying he can't die. Seeing a guy in front thinks she didn't give permission for him to run faster, so he grabs him by the collar and throws him back. The blonde falls to the ground, calling out to the chubby guy, but something has already slashed his neck, and the walls are painted with blood. Seeing how the guy did that, Fanga thinks she's no different from a ghost who lost this sanity, but now needs to increase his spirituality. The group asks what he's going to do, and there is once again facing the ghost. The sick friend approaches, saying he can't have all the fun without inviting him, staying that smooth, cold skin like that is like ice. Jade Fanga thinks the guy's suddenly turned into a poet, seeing how crazy his maybe he will also awaken spiritual power, and together they can escape sometime later. They are fleeing again, and Frank Siu asks if he's not afraid of dying. Hao says that waiting for death is worse than being killed directly. Besides, he trusts him because he's there at that moment. They arrive in the cafeteria. Everyone is dying hunger and thirst as they've been running for a long time. Tang starts grabbing everything, saying he will hand it out to others later. The chubby guy approaches, asking to share a bit, when suddenly a girl says she found something, and he tells her not to move. It's approaches, saying they are saved, but as soon as she opens it, there's another door at the end of the corridor. Fanga notices that the Li Gunther is more suppressed than before as she approaches the door. Fangus as it's not locked. As they open it, it's just utility room. That was the end of the path they chose, and the problem now is that to go back, they will have to wait for someone to die and distract the doctor. The protagonist started to head back in search of the coast while everyone cursed him for choosing the wrong path. Obviously he didn't like that because he didn't ask anyone to follow him. Hao commented that everyone should do what they want, and Brother Fang didn't force anyone to follow him. A Chu Bai guy complained, saying it didn't matter since it looked like he chose without knowing anything. Tang tried to calm everyone down, saying to concentrate on survival was the priority. He said that from what he observed, that creature attacks one person at a time and rests for 2 to 3 minutes. The choice now is to pick someone to serve as a distraction and create an opportunity for everyone to escape. Then Siu understood immediately what was going to happen. Tang came and hit him on the chest, saying that if it wasn't for him, Noon would be there, so he would have to be. The unchosen to pay for the sin show asked what he was doing, and Tang shouted for everyone to help, but Fangus stepped in and put Thim in a chokehold as she was pulled away. He called the chubby guy to help him. Now put Hao in a cold too and fell with him to the ground. Suddenly the doors slammed shut. Fangu had isolated himself outside the group. Asked what he was doing, Fangu said he never imagined he'd be so interested in people. Apparently their Stranger Thang hosts, she thanked them for their interest, but warned that he would make everyone pay next time. And with that he died again as his body fell to the ground. The group opened the door to run out. Hao, with tears in his eyes, went to help Fang, and as Tang looked back smiling, he saw something terrifying. Even dead Fangu was smiling and told him to just wait a little longer. Back to the moment, who warned that it was silicone heron out, but his time. Fangu was smiling in a macabre way as the group ran frantically down the stairs, convinced the ghost was closing in. Without warning, Fangu leapt ahead, ignoring the others, descending the steps swiftly while the rest of the group struggled with the same problem, walking in endless circles. Fangu, counting silently, reached a door and swung it open without hesitation. Everyone stared in disbelief, unable to comprehend how he had found the exit so quickly. Tang, still catching his breath, asked if Fangu had awakened his spiritual powers, but Fangu simply ignored him and gave them a warning. They had only 1 minute before the ghost would appear. Seeing Fangu's confidence, Tang smirked, assuming Fangu had indeed gained spiritual abilities. He offered Fangu 5 million to help him escape. Fangu merely smiled, replying that there was no need to rush. He had something to resolve first. Tang, confused, started to ask what he meant, but before he could finish, Fangu landed a sudden knee to his gut, causing Tang to collapse in agony. As he writhed on the floor, Fangu coldly suggested Tang use that 5 million to treat his wounds. Tang, desperate, offered even more money, but Fangu remained indifferent. The rest of the group watched in shock, cursing Fangu and asking how he could betray them like this. Fangu calmly explained that there was no way to outrun the ghost, but with Tang incapacitated, the rest of them would be saved. The group was baffled by this logic, unsure how leaving Tang behind was supposed to save them. Suddenly another kick landed, this time on the chubby guy, who fell to the ground groaning in pain. Fangu remarked that the guy should have died long ago. The rest of the group, horrified, began shouting at Fangu, accusing him of having gone mad and asking if he planned to do this to everyone. Fangu reassured them, saying he only needed to leave one person alive. One of them nervously muttered that this was a crazy plan, and the group began to question whether Fangu was even human. He pointed in the direction they needed to go, but the group hesitated, realizing that Fangu wasn't leading them. Fangu, with an eerie grin, said he would just stay behind and touch some thighs. The group exchanged confused glances, while the psychotic friend nodded, agreeing that Fangu clearly had some twisted plan in mind. As the Dr. Ghost approached once again, the group took off running, only to stop just behind a wall, peeking out to see what would happen. Fangu stood, watching calmly as the ghost doctor loomed over Tang, who was now begging desperately to be saved. Tang's face twisted in horror as he realized his pants were wet. Fangu's kick had caused internal bleeding. In desperation, Tang grabbed onto Fangu's leg, crying that they would die together. Fangu simply stepped on Tang's hand, coldly telling him not to worry. He would stay there, watching as Tang died. The ghost doctor grabbed Tang by the neck, and with a sickening snap, he was gone. Blood splattered across Fangu's face, and to everyone's shock, he licked it, commenting that the taste of revenge wasn't so bad after all. But just then, Fangu felt something strange in his chest. His heart was pounding unusually fast. He heard his wife's voice calling for him, and the thought crossed his mind. Wouldn't it be amazing to see her torn apart, just like Tang? He stepped closer to the ghost doctor, and the group, still hiding, watched in disbelief. Was this really Fangu's plan all along? Fangu's eyes narrowed as he recalled the moment of Tang's death, when the man had called out for help. With a sinister smile, he invited his friend to join him in the madness, but his friend, horrified, hesitated. The others whispered, calling Fangu a ghost himself. At that moment, Fangu had a chilling realization. Dying 20 times and enduring so much madness had stripped him of his humanity. He no longer felt any emotional fluctuations. His soul was slipping away, and in that instant, he knew he was no longer the same person as Xia Hao. He had crossed a line, but even so, he couldn't force his friend to join him. But suddenly, Zid spoke up, saying that within the company, Fangu was the only one he truly trusted, his only real friend. Despite the blood smeared across his face making him look frightening, Z decided to trust Fangu's plan. Blushing, he approached and prepared to channel more spiritual energy. As they worked, Hao inquired about Fangu's attack on Tang and the chubby guy. Fangu explained that given the ghost's speed, escaping was impossible. If she caught up, those in higher positions would simply abandon the rest. Fangu suddenly felt a chill and asked Hao if he sensed it too. Hao dismissed it, saying it was normal. But Fangu realized it wasn't an illusion, it was a sign of the ghost's power affecting him. The connection felt faint but was approaching a critical point, possibly leading to the awakening of spiritual powers. Hao, now eager, wanted to explore this cold sensation. Fangu advised that they should run, but with the chubby guy nearby, he felt secure. Hao asked about the process of awakening spiritual power, noting that he wasn't experiencing anything. Speculated that Hao's situation lacked a life-or-death crisis, so his mental state hadn't reached the necessary threshold. Hao found this puzzling and wondered about Fangu's own experience. Licking the chubby guy's face, noted it would take about 5 minutes to fully absorb the energy. They would use this time to absorb as much as possible. As the cold energy began to permeate Fangu's body, he focused on its path. It seemed to target his brain and heart, turning them into blocks of ice. A cold blade sliced through him, shattering his form, but a bright light emerged from his chest, concentrating into a red sphere. When Fangu regained consciousness, he found his senses heightened, his thinking speed increased, and his control over his body improved. It felt as though new dimensions of the world had opened up to him, though he realized he had only accessed less than 1% of his spiritual potential. The ability seemed tied to his deepest desires. Fangu wondered about this and felt a jolt of pain in his heart. The sequence of deaths had made him crave the sensation of agony, be it negative emotions, mental distortions, or pain itself. He could now inflict all these experiences on his enemies. Grinning, Fangu started laughing maniacally, convinced he had gained a powerful new ability. Hao, seeing him lose control, asked if it had worked. Fangu confirmed that it was indeed the perfect ability for him. As he remembered his dear wife, he fell into a trance. Hao mentioned that 2 minutes had passed, but Fangu brushed him aside, eager to test his new power. Hao stepped back, acknowledging that Fangu's ability seemed to be functioning well. Fangu approached the ghost doctor, concentrating his energy into his hand. He understood that this power carried all the pain he had accumulated through his deaths. The more he died, the more he could strengthen himself by reliving and overcoming that pain. With resolve, Fangu punched the ghost doctor squarely in the face, determined to make her experience his masterpiece of suffering. The punch landed, but the power seemed to dissipate. She was thrown back and dropped the scalpel while crying on the floor, but Fang immediately realized that his punch was mediocre, and the little spirituality he had was now exhausted the blow and hurt. The ghost, and She didn't seem to have felt the pain did while he thought about this, said maybe it was time to run away, or they could go back to touching again, had thought that maybe putting this energy into weapons would be the best way. And speaking of weapons, there was one right on the ground for him. Twos, he crouched to pick it up, but soon felt energy. That blade seemed impossible to lift, and its power immediately attacked Fang's heart, that could see all the times that weapon been used, the infinite amount of pain it had absorbed, but with so much resentment, he wondered if he could use it to end the doctor. He told how to step aside as soon as Shed did he attack the doctor. Right on the back of the neck, but it had no effect. Hao pulled down her shirt, noting that the punch hadn't even left a scratch. She wondered how they could defeat her with such weak attacks. The friend continued patting her back, and Fangu realized that without spiritual power, they couldn't harm her. He understood that seeking revenge was futile at that moment. As the ghost doctor began to rise, Fangu urged Hao to run, sensing that the monster was closing in. Hao, sensing someone's presence with his heightened senses, detected others nearby. When the two who had been hiding emerged, Hao berated them as cowards for fleeing earlier and now returning for help. Fangu, however, decided that their only option was to go through each of the 4 doors. Everyone was terrified, and one of them argued that with the monster on their tail, they had time to try just one door. Fangu ignored them, walking away and making it clear he wasn't forcing anyone to follow him. As they heard the sounds of the ghost getting closer, Fangu realized that by stealing the scalpel, he could alter the ghost's behavior. He opened a door, urging everyone to run. They rushed up the stairs in panic, but as soon as they closed the door behind them, it was shattered by the ghost, who began to chase them down the corridor. The ghost's face was menacing as she demanded the scalpel back. Ignoring the others, she focused on Fangu, who defended himself against her attacks. But as she opened her mouth to go for his neck, Fangu and the others were transported to another room. This time, the chubby guy was marked, and Fangu stole the scalpel again, heading in a different direction, smiling as he did. They reached the north gate and found the elevator, but the monster intercepted them, killing them once more. Fangu tried the south gate next, but the relentless ghost caught him again. Determined, he faced the final door, unwilling to accept that stealing the scalpel would always lead to death. Despite the ghost's speed, he used his ability to change the trajectory of his attempts, almost foreseeing the future. He knew there was a safe passage to the left, but just as he was about to take it, the ghost struck his neck again, and he died. It had been a repeated cycle, but now Fangu was determined to succeed. He guided everyone in the same direction, and the ghost reappeared behind them, closing in on him once more. As the ghost lunged straight for Fang, Hao shouted a warning to be careful. At the last moment, Fang sidestepped, narrowly avoiding the blow aimed at his face, and stood face to face with the ghost doctor. The ghost was puzzled by his agility, while Hao was astonished that he had managed such a dodge. Smiling maniacally, Fang continued to evade her attacks. Through countless deaths, he had learned the ghost's attack patterns, and the pain had only served to fortify his body and boost his spiritual power. Hao was impressed by Fang's ability to anticipate movements. The ghost, enraged, prepared to jump and bite him, but Fang, now confident in his understanding of her trajectory, rolled aside and avoided her once more. The ghost was growing increasingly frantic, demanding that he die already. The group couldn't believe he was managing to escape her. Hao thought this must be the power of a spiritual master. As Fang approached the door, he was confident they were about to escape, but the ghost unexpectedly halted in front of him. Confused, Fang noticed she seemed frightened and was told not to proceed. The ghost fled, delivering a precise attack to poor Hao. He staggered back, bewildered by the cold sensation, and ran to Fang, asking what had happened. Fang explained that logically, this was the path to survival, but if even the ghost was afraid, it might not be the exit but something so terrifying that even she feared it. He surmised it was an abyss. The group, puzzled, asked why he wasn't running. Fang sat down, suggesting it was time to rest. After a moment's thought, he got up and told everyone to follow him. They walked through the hospital corridors once more, and Fang cautiously approached the metal door, wondering about the potential danger beyond. Hao questioned whether it was wise to open it, but Fang insisted they had no choice but to face whatever lay ahead. As they entered the darkness, visibility was zero, and the silence was profound, allowing Fang to hear his own thoughts. The darkness seemed to swallow the path they had come from, leaving only the option to move forward. After what felt like an endless journey, Fang found himself standing before the academy's entrance, making him question if they had truly escaped. The group rushed past, and Hao celebrated their escape, urging Fang to hurry as well. However, Fang sensed something was off. Looking back, he noticed the hospital had vanished, and only the school remained. Hao expressed a desire to go home and rest after the exhausting day. Fang was dismayed to find that all the ghosts had disappeared from the city. He could accept the hospital vanishing, but not the disappearance of all the ghosts. How would he achieve revenge for his dear wife now? He stood in front of a car, grappling with the unsettling reality. She had to die by his hands, so he needed to return home. But when the driver braked, Fang found himself in the passenger seat, murmuring to himself that she couldn't just disappear like that. He didn't want his wife to vanish without a trace. As soon as the taxi stopped, he dashed out, ignoring the driver's complaints about payment. Fang raced up the stairs, insisting that the world couldn't just disappear. He burst into his home, shouting that she couldn't leave him like this. but everything seemed normal. After checking every room, he collapsed on the floor, lamenting that she had killed him 18 times. How could he live without her? All the suffering he endured at the hands of the ghost doctor was meant to exact revenge. He had accumulated rage and pain to end the ghosts, but now they were all gone. Lying on his bed, he wondered where to direct all that hatred and questioned the meaning of life without any feelings left. Just then, he received a message on his phone urging him to check the news. The Bao Academy was ablaze. He immediately saw that the news reported a fire that consumed the entire building, killing over 11 people, including some of the higher-ups. The psychotic Fang laughed upon reading that they had found his body dead. It was exciting to think that the mysterious events weren't over. They seemed to be playing hide-and-seek with him. He was hopeful he might see his wife again. His phone was flooded with messages from his boss demanding his presence at work. Fang chuckled at the irony of the boss still ordering him around even in death. Suddenly, a bloody message appeared, stating that just because he wasn't speaking didn't mean he wasn't being watched. An eerie eye emerged from the phone, telling him to follow. Fang calmly grabbed the eye, telling it to stop possessing his phone since he only had one. The illusion faded, but he was intrigued by what the next mystery would be. Standing before the charred remains of the academy, he smelled the burnt debris and marveled at how realistic it all seemed. Suddenly, he saw Faye, looking excited. She greeted him warmly, and he touched her shoulders, questioning if she was real. She playfully chided him for his boldness, but then he pulled her closer, saying he knew how things had gone. As he prepared to climb the stairs, Hao appeared, asking if he was forced to work. Fang replied he actually enjoyed it and inquired about the boss. Hao pointed to the back of the room, and Fang found the office as busy as ever. He began to doubt whether what he had seen was a lie and if this was reality. When he found the boss, he was reprimanded for responding to the group message. Fang ignored this and asked when he would receive his commissions. The boss, irritated, said Fang had the audacity to be late and talk about commissions. Fang complained that even in death, Dihai was repulsive. The boss pointed at him, questioning what he meant by dying, and told him to speak properly because he was still very much alive. Suddenly, Fang finished him off with the ghost doctor's scalpel. The boss groaned and fell to the ground. Fang, wait, please wait. Hear me out. If you enjoy this video, how about you subscribe, like, and hit that notification button so that you will be able to be notified when I upload another video.